My name is John Billings. Around town they call me the Grammy Man. We are in Ridgway, Colorado. We're at 7,000 feet, population 700. It's a beautiful little community with an awesome view of the San Juan Mountains that surround us. I began 31 years ago as the apprentice to the original Grammy maker. His name was Bob Graves. I was in dental school at the time learning how to do casting, and I went by his house to discuss casting with him and discovered that he was losing his kidneys and was on dialysis. I signed on as his apprentice, worked with him for 7 years until he passed away. Then I took over the Grammy business, and as I was visiting him in the hospital one night shortly before he died, he wanted me to promise not to let the Grammys go, that I keep them and continue them. So I made that promise to him. As a kid, I had a paper route in the San Fernando Valley. Every time I'd get $5, I'm down to the model shop getting another car. And I loved doing fine detail, and I had a lot of patience. Last year we made about 425 Grammys, all told. We actually wanted to have our own custom alloy. Basically it's a alloy of zinc and aluminum, but we've added some trace elements to it and created our own metal, which we call Gramium. I think it sounds a little nicer than zinc. This is a bronze mold, and it's the mold of the cabinet portion of the Grammy. The metal gets poured in at 650 degrees, and it immediately cools down, and it can come right out of the mold. We could probably cast about 50 of these a day. It's pretty, but it's hot. The first Grammy was presented in 1958, and it was almost like a prototype. They hadn't really nailed it down yet. Bob had made the molds for it, and it had a little crank on the side that was cast separately and was then soldered onto the side of the Grammy. You know, the old gramophones had a crank on it. And sometime or another, everybody that got one was going to see if that crank worked, and it broke off. It was on a walnut base that was about 1 inch thick, and at one point they decided, well, let's make the base a little taller, so they increased it just a little bit. All of the little subtle changes, if you could morph it, you would see this Grammy breathing. Once the pieces are then cast, then the grinding and polishing process starts, and it takes literally months to go through that process. Once we take this out of the mold and they cool down, then we grind down the sides and with a belt sander. And this step here, we're going to use this little composite wheel to clean up the steps along the cabinet. They come out of the mold pretty crude. All of that's going to need to be cleaned up, and we do it on this wheel. On this batch, we're running 400 Grammys, and this step alone will take probably about 3 weeks to complete. As I'm in the process, I sort of go into a zone where I'm just, you know, I'm thinking about last year's Grammy show, and I'm thinking about next year's Grammy show, and thinking about, you know, what can we do to streamline this process, or sometimes we've made improvements that have actually added time to the process.
I've been here now, I think, full-time 2 years, but I've known John for over 30 years, back in California when he was in Van Nuys. My father, in fact, was a good friend of the original Grammy maker, Bob Graves.
The bells, they start out as a disc of brass, and then they're they're shaped over a spinning cone on the lathe, and once they come off of the spinning chuck, they've got a lot of lines in them that I've got to get out of there. And so we rechuck it up in the lathe and go in with different sandpapers until we finally get a nice smooth finish. Pretty much how a trumpet is made. And once we get this thing down to a nice matte finish and smooth with getting all the flaws and pits and lines out of there, then we're going to polish it, and then it'll be plated in 24 karat gold.
After the base comes back from the grinding process, I take and I deburr every edge of this. And in this process, basically what John has taught me, Big John, is the feel. This is what we're looking for on this, is the feel of this whole base. It's got to be completely flat. And we take, and this probably will take me on one Grammy maybe, 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. So there we got a smooth base. That will be ready to go in to be primered.
There was always this one inherent problem with it. It was the tone arm that was very thin. I remember one year they were sending out the Grammys and about 60 of them broke in the mail before they even got to the recipient, just by the shock on the mail truck. I experimented with it and found an alloy, a zinc alloy, that I cast the Grammys out of, and that year when they were shipped out, not one broke. And I remember taking it into the Academy and holding it by the tone arm, and everybody just shrieked because they knew it was going to break. Well, it didn't break, you know. And this is actually what holds everything together. This gets bolted to the cabinet, and the bell gets screwed into the arm here. And when they come out of the mold, they're pretty crude, and they've got a lot of seams on them. And so all of that is going to have to be filed off. Now this is ready for polishing, and then once it's polished, we'll send it off to the platers. In our minds, it's going to a superstar. You know, it's going to somebody who's given to us, you know, through our lives, and now we're giving back to them. This was a Grammy that was awarded. This is a bell from a Grammy that was awarded to Tony Bennett in 1962, and it got dropped, and you can see, and he did not want his Grammy replaced, he wanted it repaired. And I could not repair this bell. And Tony had taken his to a jeweler who had hand engraved his name into the bell. I learned from Bob Graves how to do hand engraving years ago, and I don't do a lot of it, and I did have in a box of parts from Bob an old 1962 bell. So I hand engraved Tony Bennett into the Grammy that I repaired, and I never got a complaint. What we're doing here, we're in the final stages now. We've got all of our bases painted. Jimmy's really becoming the man, because he's doing a beautiful job. I did a little research and found out, you know, I have this Stratocaster that, you know, that has this beautiful black paint on it, and so I contacted Gibson and found out what they're using, and they're using a nitrocellulose-based paint, and it's almost bulletproof. Everything now has been polished and inspected. We do a final inspection. These have now been 24 karat gold plated. We have that done in the little town that's north of us, Montrose. real nuts and bolts of making the Grammy.
That's it. Pick up a bell and hopefully screw it in. And there we go. And there's your Grammy.
We've sort of established that that's the face of the Grammy, you know. Once they're all boxed, and they're boxed individually, we load them up into my trailer and I hightail it for Santa Monica, pick up metal and start the whole process again. I'm just pulling into my hometown here, the town where I was born. I left Colorado yesterday with 350 Grammys in my trailer. It was 32 degrees. We're just starting to get some spring. We still got a lot of snow on the ground. It feels like it's about 80 out here right now. It's a lot of driving across the deserts of Colorado and the deserts of Utah, Arizona, Nevada, California. There's a lot of desert out there. And driving in this morning, I've driven 899.9 miles, so we can round that up to 900 miles. And here we are. Let's go unload some Grammys. Hi, it's John Billings. I've got some Grammys for you. I don't really consider making the Grammys a job, but like I say, I don't think I've ever had a job. I've just been blessed to be able to make a living creating and working with my hands, which is something I'm good at and something that, you know, I want to pass on. I need to pass on. We're not making just a widget or a part that goes into a machine that you never even see or know what it does. We're making Grammys, and the Grammys are important to me. They're important to the people that receive them. We're a small company in a dusty little shop in a tiny little town in the mountains, but our work is recognized around the world and goes around the world. As I'm doing it, you know, I'm thinking about somebody holding up their Grammy and seeing the smile on their face, and it warms the heart.